Well, welcome to Australia, folks. This is how cats survive the local wildlife. Look,
The survival of the kittest. Hi, I'm Liz Flux.
And I'm Ben McKenzie.
Welcome to Pratchat, the monthly Terry Pratchett Book Club podcast.
Each month, we discuss one of Terry Pratchett's books with a special guest.
This month, we're discussing The Unadulterated Cat, which I'm feeling pretty good about.
And our guest is the foremost expert on cats we know. The Pratcat himself is Asimov. Asimov,
Where did
he go? He was here a second ago.
Well, I see he's exhibiting Schrodinger's cat syndrome.
He's clearly read the book.
Yeah, so he's going to be in and out with his opinions.
Yeah, I mean, and we can't really talk about his history with Pratchett. Or you could talk about his history with Pratchett because he's been reading some of the books alongside you, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's actually got a really interesting technique of reading it, which is to leap onto the book while I'm reading it, completely obscure those few pages for a little while, then get shifted a little bit, and then every so often extend a pause as I try and turn a page.
Yeah, that'd be right.
So he's probably read collectively one book, but made up of lots of different pages from different ones.
So, listeners, if you haven't already tweaked to this, you probably have by now. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode, which seemed reasonable because it is a little bit of a different book that we're talking about this month.
Quite a different speed to his usual stuff. It's in a different category, if I may say so.
Yes, it is. You'd find it in a different place on the shelf. It is not a fiction book. It is what, in the book trade, as someone who used to work in a bookshop, we used to call a humour book. There was a section for that. In fact, I'm pretty sure on the back it says, there's a sticker over the relevant bit on the back.
Someone
of my
from
copy.
A bookshop did that.
But yes, but it's difficult because they want you to put stickers on, and they're never in good places. But it probably says humour somewhere. Not on that one. That's the sort of book it is, though. It's the kind of thing where you find someone. That's the kind of thing people give you as a weird present. Like someone once gave me a book which was all weird book titles. I don't know if they were real or not. Actually, quite a few of them were because there were photographs of the book titles, but they still might have been photoshopped, but they were pretty funny.
Yeah, and I once gave myself a book called Twitterature, which was from the early days of Twitter, based off a Twitter account where they summarized long, complex books into a series of tweets.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that would have been in the humour section too. It was funny for about 10 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And look, and this is from a long line of books in that vein about cats, because we are discussing The Unadulterated Cat, which is it's a pretty provocative title in its way, isn't it, Liz?
Yeah, because, aren't all cats in some way adulterated?
I don't know. I don't quite know what that means in this context.
Everything theoretically adulterated? Because if something if you have the original thing that you photocopy lots of times, which is let's say that's how genetics works. There's probably one unadulterated cat that existed a long time, like a proto cat, and now everything's descended from that one cat. And that's not how it works. That is 100% not how science and evolution works. But everything just descended from one thing. When we go back to the ark,
it's how we think about it, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
but it's not quite right. And there is a section in the book about this. I feel like, are we getting ahead of ourselves? Should we talk a bit about Asimov, our guest, even though he has? Was that him? No,
I think he's off reading the newspaper.
Okay. You've been storing up all the cat puns for this, haven't you?
No, they just come naturally.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I'm just going to litter the podcast with them.
Okay, and I'll just try not to claw my way out as I find myself beset. Look, I can't talk. I did do one at the top of the show, but
for shame.
Look, tell us a bit about Asimov, Liz.
Well, Asimov is a shelter cat, so that's one of the kind of ways you can get a cat that is explained in there. I've had him for about 5 years, and there was that kind of thing from the book where he said no one really sets out of a day. He goes, I'm going to buy some sprouts, I'm going to do this, and I'm also going to pick up a cat. I went out to get breakfast. I went to go look at the cats at the shelter, and suddenly I owned a cat.
Yeah, well, it's. I think having recently been through this with my partner who has just adopted 2 cats, I don't think it's a unique perspective that it's difficult to go to a shelter and not come home with a cat. I think that is a case for a lot of people. Because, if you are the kind of person who wants to adopt a cat, it's difficult to look at one and not take it home unless, you're like, I don't like this cat. And if you go to a place full of them, particularly if you already like some of the ones that are there, I can see that being difficult. And it's only hard-hearted people like me who have never chosen to own a pet that it's weird. It's a weird experience for.
I challenged you to have gone to a shelter, have met Asimov. It's good he's not in the room because he's about to say how soft he is. And not have adopted him, because basically what happened is went to the first cage. There was a cat that was just very bitey, and they recommend spending 15 minutes with them to see if you get along.
Okay.
Next cage was Asimov, who was at that time called Louis, straight away on my lap, just sat there and was like, I'm going to sit here until you adopt me. He's very affectionate.
He knew what he was doing.
Yeah. And apparently he'd been there for 6 months and no one had adopted him.
How old was he?
About 1.5 years. So someone had him as a kitten for about a year and then
didn't
for whatever reason.
Yeah. It's hard to fathom the motives of folks like that. I mean, because I can't imagine ever giving up a pet once I had one. And I never, like any pets that I've been involved with, either have gone with their actual owners when we no longer live together or, died. So never. Oh, except when I was a kid, I gave away some guinea pigs, but nobody really wants guinea pigs. That's not true.
Guinea pigs are great.
I clearly did want them when I was a kid. But look, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
We should get into the book. We are talking about a humour book about cats. We should also mention Terry Pratchett's not the only author of this book, or at least the only person involved in it.
Yeah, so it's a collaboration between him and the Australian illustrator, Eric Jolliffe, is it?
No, Gray Jolliffe is his name. Is he Australian?
Well, maybe I'm reading the wrong Wikipedia article about a different cartoonist.
Well, Gray is short for Graham, and he's born in Cornwall. So he's as English as they come, really. But he's most famous for a series of satirical cartoon humorous books starring a character named Wicked Willie.
Who is
an anthropomorphic penis, a personified penis. It's
Are you telling the truth or is that a fallacy?
No, it is 100% true. And what is also true is that I have seen those books in like secondhand bookshops and in not in a doctor's surgery, but in a sort of people's collection of stupid, funny books at home. But he has a very distinctive cartoony style. Like he's got sort of, he doesn't draw, he draws some sort of wiggly lines and all these characters have massive noses, really big bulbous noses. The human characters don't have ears. But I like his drawings of cats a lot. I really, his cats have got a particular character. They also have big noses, just like the people that he draws.
Yeah.
But we should let's read the blurb and get into it.
All right.
Can you recognize a real unadulterated cat when you see one? Or have you too grown used to the boring, mass-produced cats the advertising industry adores? Real cats never eat from bowls, at least not the ones marked cat. Real cats never wear flea collars, or appear on birthday cards, or chase anything with a bell on it. Real cats do eat quiche, and giblets, and butter, and anything else left on the table. They can hear a fridge door opening 2 rooms away. Real cats don't need names, but they often get called them. Yeah, get off out of me, you bastard, does nicely. So I think that sets the tone for the book pretty well, because that's it. And I don't think it's an accident that there's a mention there about eating quiche, because one of the biggest books in this humour category was the book Real Men Don't Eat Quiche. Right, which was hilarious. And that's kind of a reference in this book where he's talking about real cats. But, he gets off to a great start in the beginning. And I think we do need to mention the dedication.
Yeah.
Wherein Terry Pratchett reveals the name of his cat. And he does not follow his own advice. His cat is named Oedipus. Which made me laugh. Like, and I have to admit, like, as much as a lot of the stuff in this book, I was like, this is just nonsense. I did laugh. There was some funny stuff in this book.
And it comes back later because, like, when he talks about the ways that you're you can get a cat. He mentions the post office window one about the litter of kittens and how they're peaceful and ready to leave mum. And he talks about how some of the male ones are getting sophisticated views of mum, which fits in quite. And I wonder if that's how he got Oedipus.
It's a callback. Oh no, I hope not. I hope that's just entirely a fictional story.
Ooh.
But yes, so in the dedication, he reveals that despite the fact, as he says, that this book clearly states that cats should have short names, you don't mind yelling to the neighborhood at midnight, which is basically, that sums up the entire chapter in the book on naming cats. Yeah.
Well, there's a great thing. There's a comic series out at the moment online by Nathan Pyle, and there's a great sort of sub-series about cats, and it's aliens trying to explain things. And there's this fantastic one where one's gotten a cat, and he's like, does it have a name? Yes, but it'll never respond to it. What's the collar for then? The collar is for the name. And I've completely ruined that one, so we should link it in the show notes. But it sums up the experience of cats quite well. Not as well as this book does, but yeah.
I remember he had one about holding the cat. It's like, it is vibrating or something. It's just, yeah.
What does it do? It vibrates and it hides. The perfect companion.
Yeah. And that is the kind of thing we're talking about. So if you're not a cat lover, let's just say straight up, this book is probably not for you. If you're not even at least highly amused by the antics of other people's cats, then,
But I would also like to add that I was not a cat lover until I got a cat. I always thought I was a dog person and that cats were the enemy. Then I got a dog cat. So
yeah, that is interesting. That is quite similar to my experience, even though I did grow up for quite a while with a cat who was very definitely a real cat. Tash was a real cat.
So you were one of the children that got injured by it and did the tea parties and all of those things?
No. Tash was just a very vaguely owned by us cat who we kind of ended up having because I moved around to several different houses in the town where I grew up until my mum and my stepdad built a house, and then we stayed in that one. And at one of the houses we lived in before that, about 2 houses before that, we were having a barbecue, and this cat appears out of nowhere and snatches a sausage off the barbecue. At least this is the family legend of the coming of the cat that I remember. And so we kind of just adopted this cat and started feeding it. And we would feed it spare bait fish. My stepdad was a fisherman, as a hobby. And so we'd feed her bait fish that we'd defrost in the microwave. And she just sort of hung around, but she was actually not allowed in the house. My stepdad was very strict about dirt in the house. You had to take your shoes off in the, just inside the door.
Cats aren't dirty though. They're constantly clean.
Yeah. See, I would have thought that, but we also, where the house was built, it was built on red clay, and there was still a lot of that red clay dirt around. And we had of course, cream colored carpets, because why would you not have those colored carpets when there's the danger of staining them irrevocably? So yeah, so she was not allowed inside. Which is and when I think back to it, our house bordered a nature reserve. When I think back to the carnage of native wildlife that must have occurred because of that, I am horrified to think about it. But we didn't have any cat doors in the house or anything. So she just lived outside, and we'd feed her and she'd turn up. And what eventually happened was she'd go next door, and there was an elderly couple who lived next door who didn't really have much going on. And they just started to feed her much nicer cat food and call her delightful names and tickle her under the chin and let her into the house. And so she gradually moved next door until she wasn't really our cat anymore. She was their cat, but still around because it was next door. So she wasn't very cuddly. You didn't really pat her. You just sort of see her around the place and go, hi. And she was a black cat, but with sort of little mottled bits of ginger and grey, but mostly very black. So that was my experience of a cat growing up, which was, and that's about as real as they come,
See, I never had a cat growing up. I had pet fish, and they're not very affectionate.
No.
I mean, though they are, they did have this weird thing with
my housemates' fish are in the room, Liz.
Yeah.
Just don't.
Jerks.
Ugh.
I don't care if they know.
Well, I guess they're underwater. They probably can't hear you.
Yeah, or they can hear me real loud because it's conducted through industrial waves. So it's, I'll go shout it in their bowl later. It's all right.
All right.
But though I have said that they're unaffectionate, there is that thing that they used to do, which is in the morning, which is when my dad would go feed them. They'd all swim into the corner closest to where he would be coming from, so they'd be waiting for him. So I don't know if that's affection or operant conditioning, but
I think it's probably the latter.
But they've shown that fish can remember more than 1 second. But yeah, I thought that's quite cute, really.
Now I feel like we should talk about the actual book now some more.
Well, it sounds like your cat was a mixture of the farm cat and the post office cat.
Oh yeah, because that is one of the chapters in the book, which is what types of cats are there. But the first chapter explains the concept of the real cat, but also reveals the existence of a thing called the Campaign for Real Cats, which is, for listeners not familiar, a piss take of the Campaign for Real Ale, which is a real campaign, an organisation that exists in the UK that exists to keep traditional methods of brewing beer and cider alive. And they've been around since I think the early 70s is when they were formed. They now have like nearly 200,000 members. Like they're not a small organisation. And they're the biggest kind of single issue consumer organisation in the whole of the UK.
Do they take a long time to get things done, or do they just like hop to it?
I didn't realise I was opening myself up for beer puns. But
the cat puns are the yeast of your problems.
Oh, no. Look, I need a porter to get me out of here. In both senses of the word. But yeah, so it's a real thing.
That's ridiculous. I just assumed it was something made up because I found out about it about 53 seconds ago when you mentioned it.
Yeah. Well, this is why it refers to unreal cats as fizzy keg cats. It's one of the complaints of the Campaign for Real Ale is that they don't want carbon dioxide added into beer. They want it to be naturally brewed through a secondary fermentation process in the vessel from which it will be served, whether that's a cask or a bottle. It's important to them.
But I just wonder like how much percentage of their lives is taken up with like how often are meetings? Like,
look, I think they're just serious about. They like beer, they like beer and cider. They like the way it used to be made, and they want to make sure there's still people making it that way, rather than that the only beer you can get is from these big commercial breweries who make it with all modern equipment and all that jazz.
Then like do it rather than.
Well, I'm sure they do. I'm sure a lot of the members do it. But they can't do it in volumes where they can serve it to other people. So they're kind of campaigning to make sure lots of people do it.
Well, I'll be reading up on that tonight because that sounds really interesting.
So the Campaign for Real Cats in the book, unlike the Campaign for Real Ale, does not really exist. But it is discussed as if it does. And the first chapter is that sort of, it's kind of a Socratic dialogue in a sense. Like there's these sort of questions as if somebody else is speaking to Terry and asking him about how do you recognize a real cat? And like
it's like a meeting kind of thing, like a town hall.
Yeah, almost like somebody's a new member or they're interested in joining, or he's like handing out leaflets on a corner or something. But it's like he's got a very definite idea of what a real cat is.
And it's certainly not Asimov.
No,
which I was interested because the whole book hinges on the fact that real cats or cats in general are outdoor visiting cats.
Yeah, where they can eat things and bring them home to you.
Which has changed, I think, quite a lot. I'm not sure if it's the same in England because I watched that documentary a little while ago where they put cameras on cats to see where they went, and a lot of them seem to prowl around the neighbourhoods. But there's certainly a push in Australia to keep cats indoors.
Well, I guess there have been cats in the UK for a lot longer than there have been cats here.
True.
So the wildlife here is still like basically just being destroyed by feral cats and outdoor cats.
New Zealand has it like worse as well because their birds are completely not able to deal with cats because they never learned to fly.
And look, this is a fairly recent change in cat policy in Australia because I remember when I first lived in Brunswick, there were feral cats everywhere. And then something happened, I think about 10 years ago, and you don't see them anymore. And I think that's partly because people have to keep their own cats inside. And so, yeah, so reading this it does feel now like this is an idea of cats from the past. And indeed, the most recent edition of the book was published in 2002 and I think kept in print until about 2005. Although possibly still in print, which is the third edition. But the
inherent nature of cats is the same, though. It's just the parameters around them are shifting.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some funny stuff in this. He describes the real cats as being particularly unattractive to look at. For example, all cats with faces that look as though they had been put in a vice and hit repeatedly by a hammer with a sock around it are real cats. And this is just one of the many places where he's using very similar like lines and gags to what we see in the Discworld books. This is from 1989, so this is the same year as Guards and Pyramids and Truckers, so one of his more prolific years.
And later on when he's describing real like an example of a real cat interacting with another real cat. Both of them are described in a Clint Eastwood way, and it was very Vimes-like scene. It was like Face Off, but with Vimes versus Vimes.
Yeah. The definition of what a real cat is, it fluctuates, but I think if we were to boil it down, what would it be, Liz? Like if we were trying to capture the idea of the real cat in like a sentence from all the stuff that is said in this introduction, what is Pratchett trying to say?
Aloof but self-interested, knows how to manipulate situations to get what they want, but strong independent spirit and propensity to vomit on things.
Yeah, I'll pay that. I'll pay it. And it is that he's playing on that trope of the like we don't get cats like we used to in the old days kind of deal. But I think he's doing it just for humor value.
Yeah.
Do you think he really believes any of this stuff is important, or is he?
I don't think he thinks it's important, but it'd be sad if we did to cats what we did to dogs. I think.
What, as in like breed
them into like sickness.
Well, yes, and. Which it has been done. There are breeds of cats that do have, some health difficulties because of the traits for which they've been bred, but not to the extent of dogs.
But it's interesting the comparison he makes between dogs and cats as well, because he talks about, I think mostly in footnotes, about how you can basically trace the evolution of dogs by just looking at them, whereas cats, it's like big cats and small cats, and what happened in between, there's no missing links.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is one of my favorite jokes from it, but it's true. Like joke. You're kind of like, you're the same, but how did we get here? And most cats are similar to each other, whereas most dogs, so dog breeds are not. And
they're very distinct. Yeah, that's true. Although they're all the same species, so that's still, which is true of domestic cats as well.
Yeah, but it's strange, like how.
Yeah.
It's tongue in cheek, I think.
Yeah. I think he just enjoyed like writing nonsense about cats because he clearly likes cats a lot. Which we already know from the Discworld book, the way that they turn up, even in some of the early novels. There is an extended bit in that first chapter, and look, it does have chapters, listeners. Don't be shocked if you read it. The original edition does not have a table of contents, but it does have chapter headings. The revised edition and the third edition, I think, do also have chapter like a table of contents. But that first section has got quite an extended thing to say that dogs are terrible. Like he's really down on dogs in this book.
But there's a big debate within that, actually. Like there's a footnote, then there's a footnote off the footnote about dogs, and it's kind of as though they're having a fight at their council meeting about it.
Yeah.
And then the chairman has to concede that he hasn't owned a dog. He's just seen them eat.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, not just seeing them eat, he's seen a particular dog eat. They're clearly like complaining about a dog that they know that belongs to someone who is a member of the campaign. And it sort of paints this picture of this real society of slightly dysfunctional people who think that cats are particularly important. Well, there's never clear what they just want people to recognize them and prefer them. It's not.
I think they don't want the cats from cat food commercials. Like they don't want gentrification of cats.
Yeah, well, I guess fair enough. Really.
Sounds like no bows, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Now the book goes through many chapters, each of which sort of gives you some humorous and arguably useful information about cats, including the story, which I assume is a true story of how Terry Pratchett got his cat, Oedipus. Which starts with the line, "We got a cat because we didn't like them much."
Yeah.
Where he gets a cat, he reveals, because he didn't want the other neighborhood cats to come into his garden.
Yeah, and he immediately points out, you can see the flaw in that plan if you dig into it, but don't.
Yeah. Which is pretty funny. So there's some interesting little insights into his real life in this book. And I think it's one of the first times he's writing autobiographically. Certainly in published form like this. I'm sure he wrote some autobiographical stuff when he was a much younger writer. But yeah, I thought that was really nice to see that little slice of his life.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I thought the book, not in a bad way, swung between different voices and narration techniques a little bit, because there is the sort of the fake out council meeting at the beginning, and then he'll sort of be like, "Oh, we did this," or "I did this," but other parts of the books will be written in general terms as though it's an instructional, informational book about cats. And it's not at all jarring. I think it flows nicely, but I thought that was, it was nice. It was peppered in with his own life.
Yeah. And I like the way too that they use certainly in the revised edition even more so than the original. They use a lot of like sort of typographic layout to like put when there's a sign about finding cats, it's in a little box and looks a bit like a sign, and as well as the illustrations, which are peppered throughout, these little cartoons by Gray Jolliffe, some of which are funny on their own, but many of which really, I think, you're just a bit like, there would be no point to this if it wasn't next to the text, which is fine because that's the purpose that it serves. But they're cute. They are cute little illustrations.
And they do add to it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. They give it a very definite character. So we go through a few chapters. So there's the getting started one, which is, this is how I got started with a cat. Then there's how to get a cat, which lists the different places you can find a cat from.
And I thought the post office window was quite quaint because it's kind of the thing we don't really have or do anymore.
It's very definitely a book from the 80s, isn't it?
Yeah, and there isn't really, like, we have things like Gumtree and stuff now, but it's not the same. Like, it's not the same as writing a sign, putting it up in the window, like in an episode of Heartbeat. It's,
Yeah, and it's and the cat's home is still listed as one of the best places to get a cat. So some of the advice is still relevant today. Advice in inverted commas. I don't think this is really a manual for anyone. Then we get to a section, and this is one of my favorite bits, where he tries to number the different types of cat, and I rather enjoyed this chapter. This is around. Well, it's only a few chapters in, but a lot of the chapters are very short. It's not a very long book. Like the original edition is less than 100 pages. It's slightly bigger and it has, I think, perhaps slightly fewer illustrations in it, perhaps. But it's the later edition of the book is this tiny little paperback, a little digesting.
Yeah, so you can take it to work.
Cover. Yeah, or have it on your,
at all times
on your table.
In your pocket at all times.
Is that what it's for?
Yeah, that's why they make it smaller.
Okay, all right.
So you just whip it out and be like, oh, that's a cat. Let's categorize it like a bird book.
Yeah. Okay.
I assume it came free with binoculars as well.
Possibly. But yeah, there's different types of cats. We've got farm cats, and they're all, humorously described. Farm cats, black cats with white paws.
Sort of tabby cats with a bit of ginger, but sometimes in the right light you could swear there's a hint of Siamese there.
Yeah. Neighbours cats, which, I'm familiar with those.
I really enjoyed Arch Villains cats because it sort of goes through like the fluffy white cat with the diamond collar that's in all the James Bond. Well, it's in one James Bond movie and then all the spoofs. But then they're like, that can't be real because there's no like squeaky cat toys for the hero to accidentally step on, or a discreet box of litter in the corner. So like what does it do? Is it hired and then it goes away at the end of the night and they've got a real cat at home? Is it like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it also points out it's hard to imagine your average arch villain owning a real cat. So it's clearly one of these fizzy keg cats. Yeah, I thought that was good. Liz, I'm going to ask Asimov, is it... No, okay, I thought he was going to make an appearance there for a second, but what kind of cat is Asimov?
So according to the shelter, he's a domestic short hair, which basically means nothing. It means he's not fluffy, but he does look like a bit of a fancy boy. Like he does. He's
very soft. I mean, he's well looked after, so he's very well turned out.
If you've seen My Fair Lady, there's that races like scene where they go to the horse race and she accidentally shows herself up by sort of yelling at the horses, even though she's wearing this beautiful gown that's so couture that it's outrageous. But all of the men are wearing grey tuxedos is what I remember from that scene, which is clearly the takeaway. And he looks like that. He looks like he's dressed for a day at the races in My Fair Lady because he's got a sort of grey tuxedo jacket that he keeps very clean at all times. But yeah, he's just a normal cat, but he does look fancy in the right light, and he only will drink from a mug.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's very particular.
Like he used to drink from other things, but then I heard it's because they see you drinking from something and they go, oh, well, that's safe to drink from. Or
that's the good water.
Yeah. So now he has his own mug.
I was going to say, is it a specific mug or any mug will do?
He's got two mugs, so that if one's in the wash, he can use the other one.
Oh yeah. Are they cat themed mugs?
Well, they used to be my mugs, but now they're his. So they're just normal mugs.
You don't want to share a mug with Asimov?
I see how he cleans himself.
Oh, yeah, fair.
So
fair. You don't want to be...
I do not want to share a mug with that mug.
That's reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but you don't think he fits into any of these types? Because I did wonder if he was a bit of an arch villain's cat.
He kind of is, because, and the thing is, like, he doesn't fit into these categories because he's indoors only. And that was on the shelter's instruction, because apparently he's got a pale nose, and if he goes outside, he'll get skin cancer.
Yeah.
So he's also got gingivitis. So he's just like,
Oh.
he's just one of these, have to stay inside.
Oh, I don't think he liked us talking about that on air. sorry, Asimov.
Yeah, well, that's why he's kicking up the litter, making a bit of a stink.
No.
Yeah.
It's going to be, he's probably have something more to, I was going to say something more to contribute later, but he's already contributed something clearly there. But yeah, so there's types of cats. There's some advice on naming cats, which we sort of touched on in the intro there, which I quite like. There's a section on cat illnesses, specifically ones apart from, actual medical illnesses. He lists illnesses like impatient legs.
Oh, and that sounds like I would love to see a video of that cat he describes with the hind legs that sort of come faster. Yeah.
I've seen that. I've seen a cat like that.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen a cat that's like gotten a bit too excited and has like tripped itself up and then pretended like nothing ever happened. But I don't know that it was a cat that did it all the time, but I have seen that behavior.
It just made me think of fainting goats, like those goats that their defense mechanism when they get scared is to just collapse.
Oh.
Have you ever seen?
I've heard about them.
Oh, I'll show you a video later.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I do like goat videos.
Yeah.
Also, among the illnesses, lorries are listed as an illness. I'm like, oh, that's no good. There's a whole section on the description of the, cat owner's experience of trying to get a cat to take a pill or other medicine. And having participated in trying to assist with other people's cats for this at least 2 or 3 times in my life, it's not great.
How scratched did you get?
Actually, fairly scratched, but at least a couple of the instances, the cat was wrapped in a towel, so the claws were coming through a towel, so not too bad.
And that's also put in the book as a technique. Like, he starts off with, you have your cat in one hand, your pill in the other hand. Wait. Okay, so you have a cat wrapped in a towel in one hand and you have the pill in the other hand.
Yeah.
I've only ever had to give, good, he's out of the room, give him tablets once, but that was after he had dental surgery for his gingivitis.
Mm-hmm.
And there was tablets he needed, and he also needed to have like a gauzy liquid squished into his mouth as well.
Have a little syringe. Yeah.
And the vet actually said, cats usually quite enjoy this because it apparently tastes like butter. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sure he's going to definitely enjoy this. So like for about 10 days, we got into a routine of, this is where he was first allowed to eat wet food, where he's not normally allowed to do it. Sorry, this is just like a podcast about my cat's specific medical issues. But so I did the thing in the book where I just shoved the tablet into his wet food and he ate around it. And I was like, you are smart. I didn't realize that. So I did the thing where I ground it up into it, and he did he tried not to eat it, but he did because he got hungry. So that was okay.
Right.
He didn't love the thing being squeezed in his mouth like the vet promised, but we got to get into a fun routine where I would get a foot on either side of him, and so he couldn't back away, and then lean down and then just like quickly squirt it onto his mouth, and he'd go
Right.
Yeah.
And not spit it out.
Well, when it's right on his tongue, so he couldn't. So
yeah, right. I don't even know if cats can spit. Actually, if you know the answer, listeners, please let us know. Use the hashtag Pratchett22 for this episode, and tell us: does your cat spit? I mean, they hiss, and maybe a bit of saliva comes out, but I don't know if they can actually spit things out of their mouth. Probably they can.
I'd also like to hear if anyone has a cat that does not object to being given pills or medication, that just sort of like enjoys it. Because I think
what is this magical cat?
I'm sure that there's always an exception to every rule. So I'm sure someone out there has a cat that's like, oh yeah, it's medication time. Good-o.
They've just been feeding it on food pills its whole life. So yeah.
Well, there's also that video of a dog where they've got 2 dogs. One of the dogs needs a medication. The other dog gets jealous that it doesn't. So they pretend to give it a medication when it comes over.
Oh, do they give it a placebo?
Yeah, I think they just go through the motions of
Okay. Now, there's also sections in the book on feeding cats, as we were just talking about, training them.
They train you.
Yeah, they train you. Another one of my favorite sections about the games that cats play. with humans and with each other. I really liked that section. That was a lot of fun. And it just sort of explaining some of the more annoying and commonly encountered cat behaviors. One of the games is called Offside, which is the game where the cat is always on the other side of the door from where it wants to be and you have to let it in. And there's an extended story about probably, I guess, about Terry Pratchett as well, about his cat going into the next door neighbour's house while he's supposed to be looking after their gerbils while they're away on holiday.
I very much enjoyed that story because it crosses over the Schrodinger's cat thing and also Offside, because he's like, I'm not sure what the deal is in this case, because the cat seemed to get into a locked house and he didn't know how to get it out and he had to contemplate burglary or like breaking and entering to get his cat out. And then his cat was able to get out after he did the famous 5 thing of poking the key out the other side of the door and catching it on a newspaper.
Yeah.
I kind of love imagining Terry Pratchett doing an Enid Blyton thing.
Oh, yeah. But of course he would, though. Like, he's read all the Just William books when he was a boy. He's like, yeah, I know how this works. Like, he's ready. He's ready for it.
But growing up like in the 90s and reading those books, I really didn't understand how that worked because we didn't have keys like that.
No.
Because they'd be like, okay, and you put the newspaper through and then you look through the keyhole. I'm like, keyhole, that narrow thing that you can't see through?
Them.
Like,
yeah, modern locks are not like that.
And also you don't leave your key in your locks anymore.
No, very rarely.
So it was very sad. Never got to try the thing.
It's the kind of experience I would definitely want to put into an escape room if I was designing another one, where you had to do that to get into the next room, because it just feels like a thing that you should be able to do and it's fun.
I mean,
I'd probably put it on the front door.
That would be great, and I would go there immediately. I mean, lockpicking, I guess, is like the next stage up from that, and that's fun. So
lockpicking is fun.
It's very satisfying
for sport. Like, don't actually do it to get into people's houses.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah.
It's bad news.
Don't do that.
Now, there is the next chapter after the cat games chapter is all about Schrodinger cats and the theory that all cats, in fact, are Schrodinger cats and can appear at any space and time. Just okay. It's Asimov. That was weird. Okay. All right. Look, I swear he wasn't there a second ago.
Well, he definitely wasn't. I heard him on the other side of the house.
Okay. All right. Well, look, it's. Perhaps there's something in this theory. I mean, now, for listeners, I assume most people are familiar with the idea of the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment. Should we explain it, Liz?
I think we should explain it, and then we should read the great shade that Terry Pratchett threw at thought experiments.
Sure. So it was originally a sort of a commentary on the ridiculousness of quantum theory, and because if you extrapolated that up to real world consequences, it didn't make any sense. So the idea is you have a box, you put a cat in the box. Inside the box is a small radioactive element that may or may not decay, in which case it will trigger a mechanism that releases a poison gas that kills the cat. And you can say that, until observed, the decay in the nuclear thing doesn't happen. And so you don't know what state it's in until you observe it. But extrapolating that up to the consequences of it happening means that the cat is not alive or dead, or it is both alive and dead until you open the box and see what's going on in there.
Meanwhile, Pavlov and his dogs are having a great time ringing bells and eating food.
Well, see, you say that, but Pavlov really did that to a bunch of dogs, whereas this was only ever a thought experiment.
Which, in Terry Pratchett's words, is something that you can do and which won't work. Like, you can't do and won't work.
Something you can't do and won't work.
Yeah,
fair enough. But later on, people accepted that, no, that's kind of, in a way, that's literally true. It's still one of those ideas that I think people have this vague grasp of.
Yeah, and also, like, they do not need to have that thing that the radioactive decay thing gets hit by a hammer, because if you put a cat in a box, it will smack around until it smashes that bottle. Like, it's...
It'll kill itself.
Yeah.
Accidentally. Yeah. So we've got that section. There's a section where you're talking about the evolution of the cat before. The next section of the book is the history of the cat. How does it make any sense? What have cats done throughout history? There's some fun stuff in there in which he claims that cats missed Australia, which is true, but not. That seems mean to single out cats. Like, all placental mammals missed Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Why is it the cat's fault?
Well, I mean, cats are also singled out in a lot of things. They're not in the Chinese zodiac. And the story goes because it didn't show up. It was too lazy.
That's interesting, actually, because there's plenty of
there's
cat
dragons.
Stories.
There's a dragon, but there's no cat.
Well, a dragon will show up. Well, presumably, if it wants to.
Yeah,
not.
All the other zodiac animals are real, literal animals that you could go out and see in the world right now.
Except for a dragon.
Yeah.
That's true. So does that mean the dragon took the place of the cat?
I mean, that's the logical conclusion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that dragons are big in Chinese culture as well, so just because we haven't found skeletons doesn't mean they didn't exist at one point.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it cats? What I mean, what was the traditional idea of cats in Chinese culture? I don't know actually.
I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to ask my mum.
Yeah, well, clearly, if the story is that they didn't show up to be part of the Zodiac, then they very much could have been written by Terry Pratchett. That traditional idea.
And I am basing that on a video I was shown when I was 7 at Chinese school, so that I'm not sure how great a source that is or how great my memory is of that, but apparently it's because it didn't show up. So, which fits.
Well, I like it. I'm into it. That's a good story.
Yeah.
And look, the rest of the book covers some other stuff that is, well, look, it's part of the life of cats, isn't it? There's a section on cats and sex, which really only touches on what cats do about it. It's not about how you deal with cats when you're doing it as a person.
And their horrifying anatomy.
Yeah, he doesn't talk about that.
He also doesn't talk about cats watching you shower.
That is a thing, isn't it?
Yeah, as in
and going into the shower.
Or your cat waiting outside a room for you. Like, it could be sleeping, it could be doing its normal routine, but as soon as you go into another room, like, as someone who has to do phone interviews quite regularly, I keep having to, like, find areas of my house that are cat-free, and you'll start, like, 10 minutes in hearing a scratching at the door as he's like, well, something's happening without me.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it seemed like he wasn't afraid to get into some risque territory, perhaps because he was writing this with a man who wrote a book about penises.
Yeah.
But, yeah, there are the weird things that cats do that I feel could have been explored a little bit more. But maybe he didn't have cats like that.
I am now horrifyingly imagining what a Gray Jolliffe cartoon about a cat penis would be like. And I don't want to think about it anymore. So let's move on quickly.
Why would you put that out into the world?
I'm sorry. Let's just quickly go on and pretend I never thought of it because I don't want to think about it anymore.
I can't stop thinking about it.
If you don't know about cat penises, you Google it. We don't want to talk about it.
Don't Google it.
Okay, don't Google it. Just don't do it. Just don't.
Yeah, just save yourself.
Just pretend they don't exist. There's a bit about cat hygiene, which is much nicer. But also,
but it's not
yeah.
Yeah.
One of the sections I like is about cats traveling in cars.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, because one of the types of cat was the traveling cat named Oscar. Like road cats.
Yeah, and there's also a whole book that I've read about cats traveling on boats because that was like a way they went around the... So, yeah.
It has a great title. What's it?
Seafarers.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. We mentioned that on a previous episode.
It's historic cats that actually went on journeys around the world. So like Matthew Flinder's cat, all those kind of cats that were kept on board to keep the food safe, basically, and also to make friends with penguins, as they tried in one sad example.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the cat got depressed, so they tried to bring in a penguin friend.
Oh,
but they kind of hated each other, so they put the penguin back.
That's a shame.
Yeah,
I can't imagine a cat and a penguin. No, I can't imagine a cat and a penguin hating each other. I just can't imagine hating a cat or hating a penguin that much.
I think the cat was just so depressed that it wouldn't have made friends with anyone.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, there's some happy stories in there too.
Oh, good.
But yeah,
few.
Yeah,
we'll relate to that in the show notes. Yeah, the bit about this, because again, this is one of the things where it feels a bit dated because they're talking about moving and taking a cat in the car, but it's not in a cat carrier.
Yeah, I was imagining it in a cat carrier in this scenario, and then so I was surprised at how it got out, and then I realized it must have not been in one. And he also has that great line about cat. He had a cat that likes to run his shoulder while driving, and then it says like, don't do this, and it's probably against the law, and then there's a footnote about it
saying what the law is,
and then a great aside about like the horrors of like having loose animals like a tortoise getting underneath your brake pedal and
creepy. Yeah. But that was fun. And how cats, there's a section about how cats relate to other animals as we get towards the end,
and each other.
And each other, that's true. There is a bit of that. But that's kind of peppered throughout the book, really.
Yeah, there's some great anecdotes.
Yeah.
Like, there's like in the game section, there's one about the real cat, real farm cat, and the real tomcat. And that is one of my favorites as well. So
cats and gardening. I mean, look, so my partner's got these two new cats who are delightful. They're a brother and a sister. They are two of the cutest cats ever. but they really like to eat some of her houseplants. Like immediately, like first day, as soon as they were allowed out of the bathroom, and they just started eating them.
How are they with spring onions? Because a certain someone who is out of earshot just will not stop chewing up spring onions if they're available, which is weird.
It does have some spring onions, but they're out of reach of the cats at the moment. So
how can they be out? Cats can reach.
Well, they're in an area that they can't get to. So it's at the moment they're safe, but maybe they won't be.
So what you're saying is your partner keeps their spring onions in a safe.
yeah, effectively, as far as the cats are concerned, and that's wise.
Yeah. And I should invest in one.
Yeah. Now, there's also a section, I've got one I can lend you. There's also a section on the real cat and children.
Oh, yeah. And that's a charming section that we have a comment / question that came in later that ties in very nicely.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cute. Although, like, I mean, they talk about, kids playing roughly with the cats and dressing them up and then putting up with a certain amount of it. But I'm like, that was not my experience of interacting with the cat that we had growing up, because the cat was strictly like this outdoor animal that just sort of we gave some food to and occasionally purred at us a little bit if we were outside with it. But that was it.
Well, the most interaction I had with a cat as a child was my friend Louise's cat, Checkers, which did actually sound a bit like a real cat dressed up like a post office cat, because it was like black with the little paws that were white.
Yeah.
And my main memory of Checkers are two things. Being in one of those little tiny paddling pools that you had in Australia in summer where you fill it up with like half a foot of water and it's like a blow up one.
Yeah.
And dangling my arm across the side and the cat just coming up and just slashing at me.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was there. And the other one is that Checkers just loved McDonald's chips.
Right.
Specifically McDonald's chips. And so if we got a Happy Meal, he'd have to have some.
Right.
Yeah. Which is weird.
Do you like the salt maybe?
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know. I remember when I was in university, there was a share house that some of my uni mates lived in that was the old 2-story terrace, and it had like a spiral wrought iron staircase in the middle of the lounge room.
Oh, did you go to university in Summer Bay?
No. No, but it does sound like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But they had this ginger cat whose favourite thing to do was to sit on the stairs and as people walked underneath, just swipe at your head.
No, but that's you. But what about the cat?
No, he was a big ginger Tom, and he just like, I'm gonna get you. And he was otherwise, I don't know. I liked him, but he was a real cat for sure. Yeah, I mean we're talking 20 years ago now. I'm old, listeners. But
I'm sorry for calling you a ginger cat as well.
That's all right. I've been called many worse things. Yeah, but so he was a real cat. He was into that.
What was his name?
I don't remember his name actually.
Because to me, all ginger cats are called Waffles.
I feel like maybe Waffles.
It's just a good name for a ginger cat.
No, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is.
Right. I feel like he was called something ridiculous like Murphy or Tom or something like that. I can't remember.
Murphy's a good name.
Yeah. He was something like that. And because he had a bit of a rough and tumble name because he was a rough and tumble cat. Yeah. So he was definitely a real cat as well. And there was another cat actually I remember lived near there that we were all horrified by, not because it was dangerous, because clearly its owner overfed it, and it was literally the size of a small watermelon and the shape of a small watermelon, but with legs.
Okay, so you've just reminded me of the other cats that I had interaction with. It was my friend who used to live in the Adelaide Hills, and she'd always have about 2 cats at any given time, but she had this one called Susie, which seemed to have been alive forever because we were about like 6, and the cat was alive before her, and she was the biggest cat I'd ever seen in my life. I don't think she was overfed by her owners. It was because she lived in the hills. She was able to just catch whatever she wanted to eat.
Right.
And she was also always seemingly asleep, counterintuitively, so we called her a snoozy. And my favourite snoozy story is that apparently, because it's the Adelaide Hills and it's Australia, Susie once came across a snake, which usually doesn't end well for cats.
No.
Apparently, Susie sat on the snake until it asphyxiated to death.
Oh, no.
That's how big, tougher cats. So that's a real cat.
Yeah, that's super real. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. That is a sad story for the snake.
Yeah, but like, you know what the snake was trying to do. Like,
Yeah. But welcome to Australia, folks. This is how cats survive the local wildlife. Look,
the
a lot
survival of the kiddest.
But the other thing about cats where I grew up is that probably a lot of them died because there were cane toads up there. right? Which
Wait, so they eat cane toads and they're poisonous? Or?
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with this terrible ecological disaster of a story, listeners, in Australia, we had a problem with growing sugarcane. There was a species of moth that would infect them. I think it was a moth. And so they imported a species called the cane toad, which fed on those moths and lived in cane fields in other countries. And it found the situation so ideal because there's not that many predators that it just proliferated across, and it's this major pest. And it's very dangerous to native wildlife because it's poisonous, and if they eat it, it can kill them. And it also sometimes will kill pets who attack and eat them as well. So, and they're just brazen. Like they'll just come up to like pet food bowls and start eating the pet food out of them. And they're gross little toad creatures.
Is there a version of this? Is it in Going Postal about like there's something in the mailbox and we'll introduce this and they end up introducing like mongooses into the mailboxes? Or is that a different book?
Oh, that does sound familiar. I don't remember.
But they had the escalating, let's get a bigger and bigger animal to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that does ring a bell.
Yeah.
I don't remember how it worked.
Well, if it's ringing a bell, I guess it's dinner time. So,
not your bell. It's not. Okay. All right. He's gone again.
All right. Good.
Anyway, look, I mean, this brings us nearly to the end of the book. It's really because like it's there's no plot to discuss. It's literally just these chapters with some gags about cats, and the last one is called "The Cats We Missed," which I how did you think about this chapter? What did you think about this chapter? Because I found it weird. I'm like, why is this here? Like, 'cause at the end of the book, he suddenly goes, "What if we didn't have dogs that were bred into weird breeds? We had cats. And here's like maybe what that would have looked like as an alternate history." And I'm like, that is a weird way to end the book.
So I started off hating it, and then I got more and more into it because I was like, oh, this is feasible. And I especially like the eek, the eki, the one that's the size of a mouse.
Yeah,
yeah. And maybe it's the illustration really sold it for me, where like it can go into a mouse hole and mug a mouse and be like, get out, buddy. My home now, which is like a real Tom and Jerry kind of thing that you can imagine. Like whichever one's the cat eats the thing and ends up in that. They would not bad for the cat.
Yeah.
But I really liked and hated the smog, the one which is basically like bald, no tail, no ears, so that it wins all fights and then at the end, good with children.
Yeah, yeah, that was funny. That was very funny.
And Dash Scats, which is like a sausage dog. Also can rub against the front and the back of your leg at the same time.
Yeah, that was great. There's some look. I'm certainly not suggesting there aren't some great gags in this particular chapter, but I thought that was weird.
But I guess it's kind of like it goes like cats now, the history of cats, where they're going, what we might have had. It's like it feels comprehensive. I'm trying to think of like another cat related section that could have been added that wasn't, and I can't. And so the Cats We Missed seems like it's plugging all the...
I suppose. And it is just before, because it's not actually the last bit of the book. The last bit is the future of the real cat. Where are they going to be? And there's a spaceman with a space cat illustration, which reminds me of some of the workshops I do with children. I guess that makes sense from that perspective. So when I was reading it, I was like, what is this? Why is this here? But it did have some good gags, you're right. And as you say, it does plug that gap.
It's comprehensive. It's a comprehensive guide to cats.
It is. But that's the content of the book. I mean, this may be the shortest episode of Pratchett ever.
Pratcat.
Sorry. No, not you.
No, yeah, it's confusing. Okay.
Sorry. This may be the shortest episode of Pratchat ever. Was that clear enough for you?
He's saying he's not French.
Okay. All right. Well, look. Anyway, but I guess it's time for us to have some final thoughts and some favourite bits and get some questions. What about you, Liz? What are your final thoughts on the book?
All right. So I said my favourite pun in it, which was where he said the lack of cats' evolution being visible was missing links, which I thought was fantastic.
That was great.
There's a bit where he's talking about training and disciplining a real cat, and he said it's not like people with big bounding dogs who sort of say, "Prince, no." I said, "No, put it down this minute, Prince," which really reminded me of a video, which I'm not sure if you've seen, where it's called something like Fenton Goes to the Park. And you can just see, I think it's just an English countryside, and all of a sudden you just start to hear louder and louder, Fenton, no, Jesus Christ, no, Fenton. And then like all of these like sheep are shepherded across a road by this dog that's gleefully running.
Oh no.
And it's so good. And it's just exactly what I meant. Because that is like those jolly dogs that enjoy running around doing what they want. And that is what it would be like trying to train a cat, where it makes you think you're doing it. but you're actually the one that's
being
being
trained.
trained.
Yeah,
And
for
there was
sure.
also a nice line about Alsatians. Some dogs are Alsatians, which is just a wolf in a collar biding its time, which is
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think. I really liked. I think some of my favorite bits, the types of cat chapter, I really enjoyed because there's so many little gags in there about different kinds of cats, and we talked about the archvillain's cat already. I also really liked the cartoon cats section. He acknowledges that those are a thing, and that there's a little bit of those. That later on, he says there's a little bit of those cats in every cat, where they're somehow able to walk on air for a few seconds before they notice that they shouldn't be doing it. I don't know. I quite enjoyed that.
Did he throw a cat in a pond at one point? Was I reading that?
Yeah, because it had eaten one of his goldfish.
So put it in
And
with the
so he
other.
snuck up on it and pushed it in, which I thought was hilarious, but also, not how I would.
It's funny though.
Yeah. I mean, he also does talk about throwing things at cats.
Clumps of dirt and omitting the thing about trowels.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also, deep pits with spikes at the bottom, how to deal with the cats, that section ends with, how do you discipline cats? And the last suggestion is call in the mafia.
But it's expensive like children's shoes because even though it's smaller, you have twice as many little concrete booties.
Yeah, they just seem to cost more. Yeah. I also really like, and this will come as a surprise to no one who knows me, I feel, the cat games chapter, where they describe cat chess, which is how cats move around looking at each other. Although it sort of ties into how I recently learned, and I don't know if it was you that told me this perhaps, that cats do share territory, but their concept of ownership of territory includes a time component. So it's not just that this is my territory. It's like this territory at this time of day belongs to me, and then I will leave and you can have it later. And when new cats enter an area, they're sort of figuring out where in the roster they can go, so to speak. So I thought, that kind of makes sense for cat chess.
I feel like I was there when that was said, but I didn't tell you that because maybe it was our last guest.
Maybe it was. But I thought that was really interesting. And the extended story of the lost gerbil mystery.
Yeah, that could have been a short story in and of itself.
Yeah.
Well, if just like a column, I'd have read that.
Yeah.
I did read that. In fact, I just read a longer version of it.
You did.
Yeah.
You read a whole book about these things. So there's lots of good things. And I think, in a book that is a humor book and which won't take you more than, a short time to read. I mean, even the second edition, which is a bit longer, is only 126 pages long, and it's got a lot of illustrations in it. So it's not a particularly weighty volume. We shouldn't read out too many of the jokes because that's really all it is.
And it's very well structured. Like it's not just a bunch of stuff tossed together. And it does come from a place of love for cats, but also there's the world weary tone of someone who's had to clean up cat vomit. Because
yeah,
it's so demoralizing when you wake up and you're like, I'm going to make myself a cup. Oh, duh.
Yeah. And look, again, I am fortunate in that I have not owned my own cat and I have not had to do that.
Yet.
Yes, that is true. Yet, it could still happen. Who knows? I may live with a cat again, and it may happen.
Maybe I'll just buy you one, and it'll be in your house, and you'll fall in love with it, and have to deal with it all the time.
Who is this cat?
You give it a good name.
I would give it a good name. I think and this is where I think this idea of real cats is a great conceit for the book, but I feel like there's another book out there for how do you name a cat? And that recently saw a book full of cat names, and it was long. It was very long. I don't know. I'm one of those people. If I got a pet, I would not be able to name it until I'd spent quite some time with it and felt I had some idea of at least the character I was, personifying it with based on its behavior.
Well, Asimov was originally called Louis, which did not suit him at all. But he got named on the way home from the shelter, and it seems to suit him very well. Though it has worked in a weird way where the writer Asimov has now become the secondary Asimov to me. So when someone's referring to Isaac Asimov and his Foundation series and they go, oh yeah, Asimov's this, I'm like, what? Oh, right. Yeah.
The other guy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, at least there are only two famous Asimovs in the world.
Yeah.
So, or significant ones. So sorry, anyone else called Asimov.
Yeah.
But it's true. There's nothing you can do about it.
Can't wait for my next cat, second cat, Arthur C. Clarke. Which is what he'll be called in full.
Really?
Yeah.
With the C?
Yeah.
And a full stop?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke.
Will they will they have fights about their respective views on science fiction?
I assume they'll have
I don't know that they disagreed.
respective spews on science fiction. Did they disagree? Were they in that big fancy club that all of those dudes were in?
No, this is what I'm saying. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So yeah,
That's not like a terrible name to be shouting out in an alleyway while banging a tin of cat food.
no.
Like, you'd seem a bit eccentric.
Yeah. I mean, we our cat had a short name, Tash. I lived with another cat named Speedy Paws, who was pretty old, and he used to be a good mouser, but hence the name. And he was black and white cat. He looks a bit like Sylvester the cat from Looney Tunes, actually. That was his sort of general...
Sounds like he's from a cowboy movie. Like, Speedy Paws is old, used to be a good mouser back in the day, but now he's retiring.
Now I'm imagining him wearing a little cowboy hat and holsters, which I think would have suited him. I think he would have been into it.
Speedy Paws is such a cowboy nickname. Like, it's just...
Yeah, he was good though. He was a nice old cat, and I've met many. So many cats with good names. Listeners, please share your cat's names and personality. Just tell us cat stories.
Yeah, that's what we really want out of this one, is to hear more cat stories. If your cat is an unadulterated cat, a real cat, or is there like a new category that we should be adding to the book if it was updated?
I guess because nowadays it's quite different, particularly in Australia. Most cats are indoor cats. They still do a lot of the stuff that real cats do. It's just that they do it. And I think they do chase things with bells in them that are small fluffy toys because they can't get their hands on real animals to destroy, which is good. That is a good thing. I think we all agree, but it is a bit different.
Yeah. I mean, Asimov likes to chase strawberries that are actually shopping bags that look like strawberries, but that's fine. I'm sure his instincts are okay.
All right. Well, let's look to each their own. To each their own. He's got his own games to play.
Oh, look, he's clawing one now.
What? Where did he? Oh, okay. All right, so we did get some questions from listeners, Liz. Let's get into those. We've got a few via Facebook, one or two on Twitter, and we got one from the Discord. So what one should we start off with?
So this one is from Steve Leahy. I'm wondering if anyone who purchased this book in Australia obtained their copy from somewhere other than a remainder bookshop. In those days of yore, when internet shops didn't exist, it was an oddity listed on the front of other books by Terry, but never appeared in any of the local bookshops, only showing up several years later once remaindered.
Well, see, you say that, Steve, but I am sure that I bought my original copy, which I lost and I had to replace, in the mid-90s when it was still in print, brand new from a bookshop. In fact, it probably would have been the bookshop that I worked at the time.
Did you have any input into ordering at that stage, though? Like, would that have...
No, I didn't, no. We had, like, most of the Pratchett books because in the early mid-90s he was fantastically popular, so you would go into most bookshops that had new books in those days, and in the sci-fi fantasy section there'd be most of his books on the shelf, at least one copy of each, whereas these days of course you go in and you don't see too many of them. So I did. Having said that, I have seen copies of it in many secondhand bookshops, but I'm sure that the copy I originally bought in about 94 or 95 was the revised edition, and it was new.
And I didn't have a copy. I borrowed one of Ben's. Ben has multiple copies.
Yes. Well, I tracked down the original edition because I thought we might need more than one.
So this was the first time reading it for me, and I was not sure what to expect, but I really enjoyed it. And I actually now know what I'm getting a lot of people for Christmas if I can hunt down enough copies.
Let's hope people who don't listen to the podcast, they might not be surprised.
It's all right. Here's another one that's more of a comment, but that is just so nice that I'd like to read it out. So Lachlan Kingsford tweeted to Rhianna Pratchett. So I'm reading The Unadulterated Cat alongside with Pratchett podcast. How many of the dressing up cat stories or tea parties with toys and cat stories started with you? And she responded, all of them.
Yeah. So there you go. Another nice slice of, the real life of the Pratchetts, which we you don't see much of. And fair enough. Like, you don't need to know what an author's life is like. That's their life, but it is nice. Yeah.
And another comment that I thought was quite nice, Danny Sag commented that he was reading out the book aloud and their cat Ski joined them, and there's a very good picture on Instagram of that. So,
oh, lovely.
Yeah, so I think someone's going to be listening into the Pratcats things and understanding a lot better than we are what he's trying to say, which answers Aaron Dick's question. So how will you translate the Pratcat's meows, or will we just have to do our best? I think you're going to have to find a translator.
Yeah. No, well, yeah, you will. I mean, we wouldn't want to put words into his mouth. Yeah, we just said we wouldn't do that. Not that we necessarily understand what he's saying.
Yeah, we're not going to dub you, don't worry. It's going to be all right.
No, that would be terrible.
And then here's another question from Jonas Larson Olanders. Why do you think that Pratchett didn't write more books like this? The Unsullied Dog, The Immaculate Bird, The Misplaced Cow.
This is a good question. And I kind of feel like there were a lot of books like this published around that time. I mean, there still is a market for humour books, but I think there's a lesser market for it now than there was back then. Nobody had a mobile phone to amuse themselves when they were sitting around. You didn't have like an iPad sitting around in the lounge room for you to look at when you were sitting around waiting for someone to show up or whatever. And so people would buy a lot of these little humour books. Most houses would have a little stack of them. And so there was quite a trade in publishing them. And I think, if Terry Pratchett pitched, I want to write just a funny book about cats, they'd be like, all right, you can have this many pages and we'll publish it as a humour thing. Like I can't see the publisher going no, particularly not when, we're at Discworld book number 8 by this stage.
And I also think because of the way it's written, it's written from someone who really understands what it's like to live with a cat. And so like I could probably relate very well to this. Like I was about to say I could probably write this, but I couldn't write it as well as Terry Pratchett did, but he's running from an informed place. And as someone, it sounds like he hasn't had dogs, which is the other one that would sell really well. I don't think you'd be able to write a book this in-jokey without having lived it.
Yeah, it all rings very true. I mean, as much as now it feels like it's a different experience to the experience, say, that I've had with cats, but it feels like this is all from real life.
Yeah, it's spoken from a place of knowledge. So I think perhaps if he'd owned dogs, which I don't know if he did or didn't, he could have written one like that. It's because he had cats, I think. Though there is the thing where people are weird about cats because they put parasites in your brain so that you're funny about them.
Oh, yeah.
So
that is a thing. Yeah.
So perhaps that's why there's only like a cat one and none of the others, because dogs just sort of like, I'll be nice to you. Please love me.
Yeah. Although as we discussed, like, he does put, there are some great dogs in the Discworld books. So he does have an affection for dogs, as much as it doesn't seem that way from the way they're talked about in this book.
I love dogs, but I have no idea what it's like to live with one, or like the funny things that would probably come along with it.
Now, we did also get a question via our Discord, which, if you're not familiar with it, is it's kind of like a chat room for chatting to us and other subscribers to the podcast. If you want to find out more about that, you can head to pratchatpodcast.com, find the support us link on the website. But Lachlan, one of our more recent subscribers, thank you, Lachlan, had a great question. He said, I started rereading T.S. Eliot's Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats at the same time as starting to reread The Unadulterated Cat, which is, I think a great choice of companion book. It's worth mentioning he was not just reading it, but listening to the audiobook as read by T.S. Eliot, which is available on Spotify. And I was like, what? And in my head, T.S. Eliot was around a lot longer ago than he actually was. And I was like, surely there was not recording. But then I looked it up and I'm like, oh, no, he was writing in the 20s, 30s and 40s. So yes, he has recorded it himself reading the book, and you can find that recording on Spotify. We will share a link to that in the show notes because that sounds amazing. But then he goes on to say, I posit that Growl Tiger is a very real cat. Which other non-Pratchett cats do you think are real cats? And I think this is a great question because, of course, I think we can agree that some of the Pratchett cats are all real cats.
100%.
Like Maurice, real cat. Grebo, 1,000% real cat. There's a cat, and again, this is where I'm showing the bits that I haven't read, but there's a cat in the Tiffany Aching books.
I can't remember.
Who I think is also pretty real from the little bits that I've read. So yeah, like the cats in his books are generally real cats. But what about cats from other sources? I
thought about this for a while and I was like, the cats that stand out most to me are Terry Pratchett cats, but there is a cat in the Hunger Games that seems pretty real. And I'm conflating the books and the movies because I read them at the same time. But the cat came across, I think, more real in the books than in the films. But it is also a massive survivor because, like, if you know what happens in the Hunger Games, it's not jolly times in District 11. But I'm pretty sure the cat makes it out.
I on a similar note, I think Jonesy, the cat from the Alien films, is definitely a real cat because, he survives being on a spaceship, which in itself is pretty impressive, but survives being on a spaceship with a ravening alien monster that's trying to eat everybody, and hisses at it. Like, that's one of the famous shots. He's just hissing. It's like, oh, there must be an alien thing in here.
If you translate what he's saying in that, it's actually like, oh, you're in the way of my biscuits.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. But I think the most real cat in all of fiction outside of Terry Pratchett has got to be Horse from the Four Rock Flats books, who I have mentioned on the podcast before.
Which I've never read. So.
Because it reminds me of a bit of Grebo. But he's a farm cat, to use the type of cats from the book, who just eats everything, like beats up bigger dogs, is basically like a beast of the moors, effectively, but like in New Zealand on a sheep farm. So he's just a supreme farm cat, and clearly a real cat. Like, yeah, 1,000% real.
Can I make a slightly potentially controversial statement in that I don't think that Garfield is a real cat?
Oh no, I agree with you. Garfield's very pampered and lazy.
Yeah, and doesn't as in there are some cat characteristics, but not really like a real cat in those ways. So one comic that I really enjoyed is Garfield, like Realfield, and it is all the Garfield, well, not all, like selected Garfield comics where they've replaced the character of Garfield with a cat that looks like Garfield that acts like an actual cat would in all those scenarios.
No, I've not seen this. I've seen Garfield without Garfield,
which is also like existential genius.
Yeah, but this sounds incredible.
Realfield.
Okay, we're going to link to this in the show notes. Realfield. All right, we're going to.
It's very believable. It just works really well, and it's just very funny. Okay. And that's a real cat.
Yeah, I'm into it. Listeners, if you can think of any other cats out there in fiction that are real cats, we would love to hear some of them. Remember, the hashtag for this episode is Pratchat22.
And the Pratcat is looking for a new book to obscure my view of. So,
so let us know. We're particularly interested in books, but if you've got some from film or television, we can hear that as well. I was thinking, because there's been a couple of cats in Doctor Who, although only in the novels and in the audio adventures, not in the television series.
More of a dog series, isn't it?
No, well, a tin dog, yes. But he had a real cat. Like, there was a real cat named Wolsey that lived in the TARDIS for a while in the novels. And one of his companions in the audio adventures is from ancient Egypt, and she has a cat that she brings with her.
Are cats originally from Gallifrey because of the whole lives things?
There is a suggestion that there are cats on Gallifrey in one of the books.
No, but from there, because
but I don't. Yeah, well, that's a good question.
Regeneration.
It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You know, interestingly, the 9 lives trope doesn't come up much in this book, does it?
It doesn't come up at all, I don't think.
Yeah, I think maybe it gets one passing mention, but that's about it. Like, he says something like uses up one of its lives or something. So I thought that was good. Like, he really stuck to real cat stuff.
I've just thought of my favourite fiction cat, and that is Throgmorton from Diana Wynne Jones' Crestomancy series. And Throgmorton is like a tomcat that's a real cat. There's a whole thing with this goddess in a temple surrounded by cats, and he is just, he's a Grebo, basically.
Oh, you just reminded me of another one, or not a specific cat, but in Michael Marshall Smith's novel Only Forward, there's this weird science fiction novel. There's this giant city that has all these neighborhoods, and every neighborhood has a specific theme. And there's one neighborhood that's just called Cat, and there's no people that live there. It's just full of cats, and it's very Neil Gaiman-y, actually. And interestingly, I don't think Neil Gaiman writes great cats, but I don't think most of his cats are particularly real cats, except maybe the Marquis de Carabas from Neverwhere, who is a person, but the character is. And this isn't a spoiler, but I don't think he ever explicitly mentions this, but the character is basically Puss in Boots if Puss in Boots had actually turned into the person that he pretends to be in the story, which is the Marquis de Carabas. And so or his master pretends to be anyway. So he's quite interesting as a character.
Is the premise of Puss in Boots a cat puts on boots and people think it's a person?
No, I haven't seen the film version, like the Shrek spin-off, but the original fairy tale from memory is a very clever cat traveling with its master. Its master gets robbed, and the cat puts on some boots and pretends to be his servant, and
yes, what I said.
Yeah, fronts up to some some nobles and is like, my master, the Marquis de Carabas, has lost all his clothes. He's been robbed while having a swim in the river.
Too.
Yeah, he can talk and wear boots and a hat. And
basically is a person.
It's a weird fairy tale. Now I want to reread the original version again because it's such a strange story, but it's a lot of fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe him as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, right. I think those are all the questions we've got, which means we come to the end of the podcast. We should thank our guest. Thank you.
Someone's getting an extra treat tonight.
Oh, what are you feeding him at the moment?
Special dental biscuits for his gingivitis.
Oh, are they delicious?
Well, I mean, he just does mung through them. So, I mean, I guess the noises.
But are they? Are they delicious, Asimov? I'm not really sure how to interpret that answer, but that's okay. We'll
see how.
We'll
get your translator to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we'll be back again next month with a more regular episode as we head back to the Discworld, Liz. We're heading straight back into the series, and we're going to be reading.
You know, the one like with Jim Carrey in it. The
Masquerade.
Yeah.
I'd never thought of that connection before. Now I'm imagining Phantom of the Opera with Jim Carrey, and I'm not sure.
I don't love that.
How I feel about that. Anyway, we're going to have a great guest, Miff Coghill, who is both an English teacher, a huge Pratchett fan, and also an opera singer. So we'll be able to give us some insight into the opera parts of the book. So I'm very excited about that. That's going to be a lot of fun.
There's an amazing Venn diagram of stuff.
It is. And if you want to send us questions about that in advance, the hashtag for that episode will be Pratchat23.
Wow.
We're coming up on 2 years, Liz.
Yeah.
Amazing. And look, we are also going to be recording our first bits of bonus material for our subscribers. So if you would like to hear that, all you got to do is head over to our website, pratchatpodcast.com, and look up our support us page. You can become a subscriber if you want, and you can get onto our first bits of bonus content, which we are calling, Liz...
Ook Club.
Yeah, I can't believe that. It's such a great name. I can't believe it didn't end up being the name of the podcast. But now it is the name of a podcast.
Yeah.
It's the name of our bonus content podcast. So if you want to hear it, hit us up, become a subscriber. There are other goodies you can get for being a subscriber. But even if you're not a subscriber, if you want to help us out, you can spread the word, tell people about the podcast. You can review or rate us on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find us in whatever podcast directory you use. But until we meet again, make sure all your cats are real cats. You've been listening to Pratchat, the monthly Terry Pratchett Book Club podcast with Pratchatters Elizabeth Flux, Ben McKenzie, that's me, and guest Asimov. Pratchat is produced and edited by me, with music by David Ashton of Sample and Hold Studios. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook at Pratchat Podcast, and listen to past episodes and support the production of new ones via pratchatpodcast.com. Join the conversation for this episode using the hashtag Pratchat22.
Pratchat is brought to you by Splendid Chaps Productions. We make entertainment for your ears, like the time travel comedy series Night Terrace. To find out more, visit splendidchaps.com.